And some Islamic State militants in Iraqi cities are hauled up in buildings with civilians, prompting the United States to use a different tactic, one used by Israel to try and spare the innocents' lives. But it is a controversial one. I-24 News defense correspondent Anna Ehrenheim with more.
The United States has adopted an Israeli battlefield tactic in its fight against the Islamic State, exploding a missile above a building to knock on its roof as a warning of an impending bombing. Israel has used this tactic in recent operations in Gaza to warn civilians. A 2015 United Nations commission found that the tactic was not effective, as it sometimes caused confusion and did not give residents enough time to escape. This revelation that the U.S. is using an Israeli tactic came Tuesday at a press briefing which described an April 5th strike against an IS financial storage center in the Iraqi city of Mosul. The U.S., which had the building under surveillance, saw that it was inhabited not only by IS militants, but also a woman and her children. That led them to formulate a plan to get all the civilians out of the building.
We went as far as actually to put a hellfire on top of the building and airburst it so it wouldn't destroy the building, simply knock on the roof to ensure that she and the children were out of the building.
But the woman, who had run out of the building following the warning, ran back inside a short time later and was killed. Despite her death, it was said that the tactic may be used again in the future. According to the United States, the storage center was a house of an IS finance emir, holding as much as $150 million that was being used for IS operations. And although IS tries to convey in its propaganda the impression of a financially strong group, strikes by the US-led coalition and Russia have hit the group extremely hard. IS is suffering from morale problems among its fighters, in part due to the shortage of cash after more than a dozen airstrikes against money centers. And the number of foreign fighters coming to join the group in Syria and Iraq has now dropped from about 2,000 a month last year to only about 200 a month now. A new IS memo that was leaked by Ayman Jawad al-Tamimi, a fellow at the Middle East Forum and researcher at the IDC Herzliya, has found that a number of fighters have even falsified doctor's notes to, quote, avoid frontline duty. In response, IS has warned that any doctor who is found to be falsifying the notes will be held to account.
And Ayman al-Tamimi, fellow at the Middle East Forum and researcher at the IDC, joins us now. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Islamic fighters over the years have been receiving benefits, but those have changed over time from what we understand.
Yes, internal documents show that those benefits have been cut in some ways. So, for example, electricity access of fighters' homes has been reduced. Fighters have been warned not to stop using vehicles outside of operation hours because of the financial wastage this causes. And also a document came out from Raqqa province, which is like the de facto Syrian capital of IS, showing a salary cut for fighters. I mean, normally speaking, the base salary is $50 a month, and then you get $50 for each wife you have and $35 for each child below 15. But it seems like in Raqqa, the financial burdens of fighters are probably particularly high, and this is why the salary cut came about.
And what are the current obstacles facing the coalition in the fight against the Islamic State?
So yes, the Islamic State is facing financial and military challenges, but as you know, there's still these obstacles. So one of them foremost relates to this problem of the border between Turkey and Syria. A portion of it is still controlled by the Islamic State. But there's a big dilemma for the coalition. Do you support the rebel fighters who have been particularly weak and haven't really been able to turn the tide against the Islamic State, or do you turn towards the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces coalition to which Turkey is extremely hostile? And so long as that dilemma continues, I think for a considerable time you're still going to see IS on the border with Turkey in northern Syria.
Ayman al-Tamimi, a pleasure having you with us this evening.
Thank you.
And in studio with us is I-24 News defense correspondent Anna Ehrenheim. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And as we heard in your report, new tactics are being used against the Islamic State. And as we heard from Ayman, also their benefits are getting cut, showing some overall monetary issues with the group.
That's right. Back in 2014, the U.S. considered them the most well-funded terror organization they ever faced. That's better than al-Qaeda. But now, after just about 20 airstrikes targeting their cash centers, they've lost about $800 million just in cash. That doesn't take into consideration their oil, money they get from trafficking in stolen artifacts. Then again, those are also being hit hard. But like I said in the piece, one strike alone in Mosul led to the destruction of $150 million. That's a lot of money that they lost. And embedding themselves in the population is one of their main tactics. But the population is also getting hit by those airstrikes. That one strike in Mosul led to deaths of civilians, even though they use the Israeli knocking on the roof tactic. And the populations in those cities are human shields.
And moving closer to home, you mentioned Israel using Israeli tactics, but along Israel's border, there is now the threat that the Islamic State may use chemical weapons in the Golan.
It's an Islamic State affiliate. It's the Yarmouk Brigades, which is in the southern Golan Heights of Syria on the northern border with Israel. They're actually using abandoned UN outposts. That's where their fighters are staying. Now, Israeli security experts do not believe that they will use chemical weapons in the near future, but IS has used chemical weapons in the past, both in Syria and in Iraq. And to have that fear, to instill that fear that this might happen, is another favorite tactic of theirs, instilling terror in civilian populations.
And it's definitely a threat that people need to pay attention to in governments. Anna Ehrenheim, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.